This week on Seattle Sucks, Carmen Best, her Twitter account. What does it all mean? What's going on in her head? An exclusive interview with the social media maven herself. What the fuck is she talking about? That's this week on Seattle Sucks. Very sad RIP.
Also, friend of the show, Katie Herzog. Gets a letter published in Harper's Bazaar magazine. That and more on this week's episode.
Yes. Learn how our friend Katie insinuated herself into an international cabal of TERFs.
That and more on this week's episode of Seattle Sucks. Welcome back to the Seattle Sucks podcast. We're back in the house. I have Greg with me. Colin is still on his vision quest. If anybody who's been out in the woods has seen him, let us know. Let us know if he's okay. I hear they're going to do an episode on him in Unsolved Mysteries Season 2.
Oh, yeah, there's a new Unsolved Mysteries. Colin, this could be you. Where did you go? He was last seen walking atop the Pacific Ocean on his way to the east.
Yeah, Colin, if you can hear us right now somehow, we miss you. We want you to come home. All right, Colin?
If you think Colin listens to this fucking show, you're fucking high.
So, yeah, a lot of exciting things happened in Seattle this week. Our police chief reached out to a real one on Twitter. Katie Herzog somehow has gotten herself back on the goddamn show. And some other stuff, but I think we need to begin with something that's actually like not particularly funny and is sort of off-brand for us, and that it's actually like sincere, which is on Saturday night we learned of the death of Summer Taylor, who was an activist who was hit by a motorist on I-5 on Friday night, late Friday night, in what appeared to be a sort of motivated vehicular attack, a murder, right? Also, another pedestrian was hit as well, named Diaz Love, who I guess has just woken up in the hospital, is what you're telling me, Greg?
Yeah, Diaz, they're awake, alive, and so good health to them, for sure.
Yeah, and it's sort of a tragic continuation. I think in the press, they've tried to play this up as a tragic accident, right? I will get into the police's sort of statements on that, but we know that going back to the original Black Lives Matter protests and the Standing Rock protests, there has been a call from law enforcement and from right-wing fucking psychopaths in this country to run over protesters, and they've certainly glorified it. And we know this is not the first time in Seattle that this has happened, right? This is the first time they've killed somebody, but they've tried it many times before. And in fact, a Seattle police officer ran their car into a group of protesters earlier that day.
Same night. Dan Gregory merely, almost lost his life mere inches from a headshot. He took one in the shoulder from that brother of a cop who ran in down 11th. Early on in the Capitol Hill protests. This is something we've tried to highlight from the beginning of this, that there's going to be violent reprisals against these protests, and this is a particularly sickening example of that, a really sort of dark thing to see. But across the country we're seeing like literal lynchings, and I think the thing to understand is that if this is happening now, how society is going to how we're going to confront violence, police violence, death of people in the black community at the hands of police, and these protests. While this is an open question, if this is the level of violence, then you can be assured that if power is not decisively stripped from police, that the violence will only be that much greater the reprisals if this movement dies down without taking significant power away from police departments, that the reprisals will be just all that much worse.
Yeah, and sort of indicative of this has been the police response, which is, that morning, the head of, or the Washington State Patrol Captain, Ron Mead, who was there on the scene, his response to this, was they told the press, blocking a freeway is a crime, and no longer are we going to enable that criminal conduct to continue. We are not going to be allowing protesters to access the freeway unimpeded, and there are consequences for criminal conduct. Essentially asserting that this person getting murdered by this other, this driver, that it was their fault, right?
Yeah.
That they were, engaged in behavior that deserved that they should be killed. And for those that think that this is maybe taking his language out of context or something, we had a sheriff's office deputy, I believe, posting some interesting things on his Facebook account.
Yeah, King County Sheriff Deputy Mike Brown posted a picture, of a car decal that says "All lives splatter, get your ass off the road," with the pedestrians being hit by a lifted truck. That's obviously despicable and not surprising. Like, this is what we know cops think. To go back though to the state patrol, like, that he's asserting there that we're not going to allow protesters to go on the freeway because it's illegal, and we're to protect them. It's obviously victim blaming. Walking on the freeway has always been illegal.
Yeah.
The cops and the state patrol have always tried and usually succeeded to keep people from protesting on I-5. I don't think anyone had successfully shut I-5 down in a long time. I mean, I don't think they even did during the Iraq War protests in 2003. I think 1968 is the last time the I-5 was shut down. And it was shut down a month ago for the first time because there were enough people who just walked right by the cops, and the cops had to back the fuck up on that first Saturday. When we were down near Westlake and the cops started going ape shit, even though it was a very tame, not very radical march and assembly going on, there were people walking onto the freeway and they couldn't stop them. So they were trying to stop them. This has always been something the cops... It's always been illegal. It's always been something the cops will stop you from doing. What the situation now, a month after that, is that because they'd been driven away, because the number of protesters had been enough to back the cops up, they'd settled into a position of just closing down the on-ramps, and as the number of protesters on the freeway dwindled. So this is just a case of the fervor and number of protesters on the freeway having dwindled, and now the cops are allowed, they now have the power to reassert control of that space. So this isn't a choice he's actually making, is my point.
Yeah.
This is, they did not have, it was not their choice to allow people on the freeway at all. This is sort of a, I just don't want him to get away with saying well, we've just been allowing in our magnanimousness the free speech of protesters to do whatever they want. No, they were forced to do that. They didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Now there are fewer people. There were not that many people out there that night, and so now they're able to reassert that control.
Yeah, and I mean, the police always will try and turn a tragedy to their own advantage, right? And this is, I think that comment, and the mayor, I believe, also signed on to that, was basically a reassertion that it goes all the way back to their retaking the CHOP and stuff, that they are going to reassert, that Seattle PD, the Washington State Patrol, everything is going to reassert the authority of the police in the city, right? Contra the protesters. And it's, I think, all of it is a sort of stunning reminder of what's to come, as you said, if the police aren't severely stripped of their power, right?
Yeah.
Seriously stripped of their power. If we don't win in this struggle, expect a lot more of this.
Yeah. And look no further than this Mike Brown, this sheriff's deputy, who made this all live splatter post. And turns out to be Dow Constantine's driver and Jay Inslee's cousin. Hilarious. What's interesting about that is like, so this was.
And it's also not a 20-year-old man or anything too.
Right.
This is an old ass fucking man.
Oh yeah.
A fucking adult.
Yeah. This is like a 50-year-old dude. Now, King County Sheriff's Office, they're like, oh, we're starting an investigation from our internal investigations unit, all of which should be disbanded. That should be in the list of things that go when you defund the police.
Yeah.
All internal investigations units should be completely liquidated and external investigative bodies built. But that's an aside there. So this is stupid. He was placed on administrative leave, meaning, paid vacation. And what's, Dow Constantine then retweets that post from the King County Sheriff's Office, talking about this shit. Keeping in mind that the current King County Sheriff is a guy who, like, since he got in, has been, like, rehiring people who've been fired because of excessive use of force, etc.
Well, much like the new head of SPOG, the King County Sheriff, essentially has come in as a anti-reformer, right? Like he's I'm coming in because the cops need to kick ass again, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the retrenchment.
And this is Dow Constantine, King County executive, who was driven around by this guy as part of his executive protection unit. And he says, to provide more context to the sheriff's post, the King County Sheriff's Office hires, fires, schedules, and manages all members of the executive protection unit. The reporting and disciplinary, blah, 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 entirely within the sheriff's office. His point being, I am passing the buck here, and I am leaving it to our new, again, like revanchist sheriff and the internal investigations unit, and don't come looking to me for this shit. Now,
well, also avoiding the fact that the fact that this guy is Jay Inslee's cousin is why he's driving Dow Constantine around.
Right. As opposed to doing a real job, right? So. Because guess what the protection unit does when Dow Constantine doesn't need to be driven around? It's just in his office. They just sit on their ass.
Yeah.
I mean, you can be guaranteed of that. So now, because he went on KOW and is like, he quotes himself a lot on Twitter here saying like, oof, importantly, this is not just about individual bad actors. It's about a system that leaves open every day, every encounter, the possibility that deep-seated biases are going to evidence themselves. This is just like, so first he passes the buck and then he's like, yeah, gosh, it's a big problem. Bias. This is what we're going to be up against for the next years. Fighting for actual abolition is this, absolutely worn out, fucking tired by decades thing, bullshit about implicit bias. Like, oh, there's just some of these cops, man. They just don't realize how subtly, implicitly racist they are, and not the reality. You unwilling to acknowledge both the reality that these people, it's not about implicit bias. They know what their job is. They've been trained and told by their society that it's to enforce class and race hierarchies, to punish poor, non-white people, to oppress populations that our society wants oppressed. They know this. This is bullshit. But he's also passing the buck, right? Well, first, let's talk about the fact, the Jay Inslee says, I'm deeply disappointed and totally reject the language of my cousin, Mike Brown, who made inflammatory comments about recent protests. Inflammatory comments. The language is unacceptable and just flat wrong, particularly from a law enforcement officer. Blah, 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 as we try to heal the divisions in our community. It's murderous is what it is. And if you were willing to, this is who these people are, willing to just completely blind yourself to the reality. This is the asshole who sent in when the SPD went apeshit on peaceful protesters, was like, oh, fuck, I need to back those guys up with the Washington National Guard.
Yeah, basically it's like, the problem with SPD is they don't have enough soldiers at their disposal to, under their command to do what they want.
And now, again, to just go oh, that was inflammatory. That's not the kind of thing we need to be saying when we're trying to heal. And it's like, these people, they are not able. They do not have even the beginnings of the imagination to rise to this moment. These people are the enemy.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not hard to understand that Mike Brown is not a unique individual in policing circles or right-wing circles. All you had to do was read the comments on his Facebook page, the comments on any of the articles that were written about this murder, anything like that. Just thousands of people cheering on the death of this woman, or the death of this person. And it is, similar to the death of Heather Heyer, right? In 2017. And we'll post, I had totally blanked on this, but there was this amazing article in The Intercept in 2017 that pointed out that not only are 7 states proposing legislation to make it legal to run over protesters with your car, it is in 2017, but that all the legislation was backed by the local police unions.
Yeah.
So this is not the ravings of a lunatic in the sheriff's department. This is what the police believe at a deep intrinsic level should be happening, and what will happen if they aren't, if you don't take their guns away, if you don't take their vehicles away, if you don't take their fucking money away, if you don't take their fucking jobs away,
and if you don't take their position in society away, if they come out of, because that is another, like, even if those material like gains, like defunding SPD by 50%, that's, if we don't take that away from them, that's 50% more money they have, sure. But beyond that, if they come out of this seeing, these protests were ultimately impotent, and we are ultimately still, as we always were, America's warrior monk class of infallible, fucking, like, murderer saints, then that they're going to be emboldened, and they're going to take out their rage on anyone they can find connected to the protests. They'll do their best to find, the most prominent but vulnerable people, but who knows where they will lash out. And who knows, if this goes badly enough, you may just find that they go the collective punishment route, and because they're already, again, built for terrorizing communities of color and the poorest communities of color. So it may just be that once the pressure is shown to be impotent, they may just ratchet that up just on a daily basis, in addition to targeted murders. This is the future we can look forward to if the advantage is not pressed.
Yeah, absolutely.
The last thing I want to say about this is about Dow Constantine passing the buck, going like, look, all the hiring, firing is in the purview of the county sheriff. First of all, like, what a loser, what a just a pathetic piece of shit. You don't need to say that. You could actually just come out and say, fuck this asshole. I hope he I hope he dies in a ditch. I never want to see his fucking face again. And if you don't fire him immediately, then the King County Executive and the Sheriff Department are going to have a fucking problem. Okay, that's what he should have said, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, he's not wrong, because what you have in sheriff's departments in America, you've written about this on Mechanical Freak, Brian. We should link to this. Is these law enforcement fiefdoms that are given the legitimate power of elected office. This is a bad thing. It sucks ass. It shouldn't exist. And I just want to bring it up because, it's definitely one thing that should be abolished, along with all law enforcement. A good step along the way. God knows how you would do this. And honestly, it's probably not a good thing to concentrate on because it would be so fucking hard. But getting rid of elected cops. Okay? Yeah. Now, I bring this up because sometimes you see in this movement people calling for, and honestly, I don't even know who I've seen calling for it. I just know, I haven't seen it a lot, but you do sometimes see people calling for an elected oversight board for SPD. I think this is a bad idea. I think it's very bad. I think it sounds good, right? Because it's like, well, we need direct democratic control of the cops. Well, ultimately, actually, that is a that's a reformist reform. It's that is not a reform toward abolition, because when you because the thing is, the cops should have, right now, you're right, there is no democratic control over the cops. So, but the way to address that is by reining in their power some fucking way. Because actually, there is supposed to be democratic control over the cops now. We have an elected mayor and an elected city council. that the SPD, unlike in the county, see in the county sheriff, you're fucked on that because they already have that. Okay, but see that just gives that means there's a cop you elect to be the elected cop who then has his own power. Okay, right now, if you want to rein in SPD, you need to rein them in such that they actually follow a chain of command and the policies set down by the elected fucking leaders of the city. Okay, that is how it should work legally, like right now. It doesn't because they're an armed band of fucking psychos who are out for themselves. But
if it doesn't work now, why would it work under another level of elected officials who, by the way, have less power than the ones currently unable to control them?
Except potentially in some other system, in some other political world 10 years from now where actually it becomes its own entrenched thing where again it's all about power in the streets. Look, either we will have the power the power in the streets to rein in SPD or we won't, but we can put that pressure on the city. We don't need another if you have an elected body, you have, first of all, you've just insulated the rest of the city government from responsibility for the cops, just like Dow Constantine. Well, they're called the King County Sheriff, but they have fuck all to do with the county government. Yeah. Now you have a city council and a mayor that can say, well, listen, you got to talk to those people. You've got, at best case, you've got more elections you've got to try and run in and control. More people to put pressure on.
Spreading more of the left's very little money across more elections. But, Amazon's got lots of money.
Yeah,
the wealthy have lots of money.
You've also got compete with them in potential more position where it becomes a thing where you're just electing cops to be the top cops, right? Yeah. Or cop-friendly people, or people who then see themselves as the top cops once they get in there. Again, it's all about power. If you have the power to constrain the cops because of organization in the streets, then you do. But to that point, you're certainly not helping yourself by adding this layer. There's no benefit, and there's a lot of potential downsides to make organizing against police power worse in the future. There's just no upside. We have an elected police accountability body. It's called the City Council and the Mayor.
Yeah, and it again fails to understand what's happening here, which is that police violence isn't an accident. It's not that the police don't get it or whatever. If you think the police don't get it, you don't get it. The thing is that the problem with police is policing itself, right? Yeah. And having another elected official isn't going to resolve that. The only thing that's going to resolve it is getting rid of the police
likely
themselves.
Make it worse.
Yeah, it'd just be another level of obfuscation.
But potentially easily make the situation worse, more entrenched.
Yeah. And so the thing is, if you believe the police are racist, if you believe the police are violent, all these things, which they definitely are, I think this is sort of a warning that if you're going to take a shot at that institution, you can't miss, right? So, again, our hearts go out to the victims here, and but it's a horrifying, it could be a horrifying vision of the future here. So, stay in the streets, keep the fight up. I promise.
Press the attack.
Yeah, press attack, and I promise we'll transition to some lighter fare now of our usual stupid shit.
Yeah, well, the world keeps turning even outside of these the uprisings against police violence in this country. So there's other stuff going on.
And one thing that's going on is the Seattle Times editorial board. They continue to publish my letters, and here's one now.
Great.
So the Seattle Times editorial board had a letter published yesterday, or had an editorial they published yesterday. Kshama Sawant, less rhetoric, more cooperation.
Oh, are they talking about the Kshama Sawant who, after a 3-year battle, has finally managed to get a progressive tax passed in Seattle that will actually raise money from our biggest companies, such as, say, Amazon?
Yes. Now, I will remind you, Greg, that we probably shouldn't count our eggs or whatever on that one, since we got progressive legislation passed once before and then had it immediately repealed by a spineless city council.
Yeah, I feel like the moment's a little different. You may notice there are people in the streets.
Yeah, I think this one has a much better chance of sticking, but, that rollover on the head tax, I also wouldn't have predicted in the time frame that it happened. But
no one could have. That was early. That was one of the earliest episodes of Seattle Sucks.
Yeah, one of the things that helped launch the show.
Yeah, just the absolute stupefaction, like
No.
of like a city owning itself so fucking hard.
Yeah.
Like it's never. I mean, who's ever owned themselves more?
Well, never before has a city said, "Hey, we just received a phone call from the world's richest man, and we now are overturning our legislation." After hearing it, fucking unbelievable. But anyways,
Amazing.
This is a complaint about a different thing. Though,
Oh,
Greg.
okay.
I think you'll enjoy. So I'm gonna read you some excerpts from it. Here we go. Seattle City Council member Kshama Sawant's relentless attempts to paint Mayor Jenny Durkin as a two-dimensional corporate shill are tiresome in the best of times.
Wait. Times are serious right now. There's a lot of serious stuff going on, so
you can't criticize political leaders.
We shouldn't be getting divisive. And this is the last time we should be getting divisive. Am I getting warmer?
We're in the ballpark.
Oh my Christ in hell!
But we're gonna take a little diversion here. Sawant's accusations ring false. Seattle has an accomplished, smart, and dedicated mayor who has supported police reform since her time as a U.S. attorney.
Okay. The first three things they said there,
Demonstrable.
no one has ever debated that she's an accomplished cop, a highly accomplished prosecutor who has, prosecuted, put lots and lots of people in jail. No one doubted.
She put the last black person in jail for selling weed in the state of Washington.
Yeah,
which is one of her many accomplishments.
Yes,
and you can
she is
go
very
to the Doomed
accomplished
Planet podcast to hear that story and the interview with that gentleman.
She's very accomplished at expanding the prison population, putting black people in jail, etc. No one doubts, again, in the same vein, that she's smart. She's clever, in the way that like a dragon or like what's another mythical villain? Like a crafty mythical villain.
Well, she's clever, like a bridge troll who's going to trick you into. But I mean, honestly,
dedicated
dedicated, yes. Dogged, yes.
Yes, to imprisoning people.
Yeah, I
as
get
a
she's
cop.
Clever. I don't know has ever quite come across. I mean, she seems to be very mediocre, but
well, I mean, in her chosen profession as cop, she's been very intelligent. Yes,
they've anticipated that you might be a bit skeptical.
Okay, but the fourth thing they said was committed to police reform. Am I wrong there?
Yeah, that's just not true. That's not even true in the
that's what are they going to cite? Technically, she was the U.S. attorney when the Obama administration started the consent decree process, and leave out the fact that she covered for the cops and fucking tried to hamstring the process the entire time she was the U.S. attorney.
Yeah, I mean, just pop over and look up the Harry Bailey police chief fiasco and her role in that, and that'll on Mechanical Freak at some point in the future we'll have a whole write up on this. But take it from us, she has been a impediment to police reform in Seattle in a major way.
Also, like, for example, right now.
Yeah.
You know how she's not defunding police?
Yeah. And that she is the only politician that's actively standing with SPD.
Well, look, I mean, in a way, they're right, because I think this movement is really drawing a fucking line, right? It's drawing this line between abolition and reform. It's make this compromise toward abolition position of defunding SPD. But yeah, you know what? Yeah, she's a reformist in the kind of reform we know that doesn't work and must be abandoned, in that she wants to make little PR changes that don't do shit and ultimately cover for the cops and enhance the powers of the police state.
Well, the Times goes on. Agree or not with her every move in response to the massive Black Lives Matter demonstrations.
Oh, that's actually, for the Times, that's like pretty backhanded.
The mayor is in a difficult position, balancing an obligation to ensure public safety with honoring the rights of protesters who are understandably outraged and demanding change.
When have the protesters been an impediment to public safety by existing, marching, being in the street?
Well, she honored
Those
the
aren't-
rights
those
of
two
protesters
things-
by ordering chemical weapons attacks.
Yeah, yeah. So not exactly.
mean-
She may be in a difficult position. She's not walking any fine fucking lines.
So Sawant absurdly called for Durkin's resignation or removal over crowd control tactics that were legal when police deployed them. So I love this argument. This is a real lawyerly argument, right? This argument mirrors exactly an argument in my favorite film, The Reader, which is a movie about a concentration camp guard that we learned to sympathize with because she couldn't have known that concentration camps were bad because she was illiterate and didn't know how to read. At one point during her trial in 1960s Germany, a group of law students debate whether or not she committed a crime, to which the professor says, it can't be a crime because it wasn't illegal at the time what she did, so therefore it's not a crime. And
Well, it's perfect because
a
this
fucking
is
amazing argument that I feel like every horrifying abuse of humanity has been justified under this.
right.
Ever.
Right. I think if you just told Kshama, like, Kshama, that stuff was illegal. When then she would retract that immediately and go,
Yeah.
oh, fuck, I didn't realize.
I didn't
Also,
know
like,
that shooting, flashbangs at protesters' heads was legal at the time. If I'd known that, I would not have said anything bad about it.
you know what?
I would have cheered it on
First
in the
of
front
all,
row.
chemical weapons are banned under the Geneva Convention, but we don't recognize international law in America, so that's a well-established legal precedent. But look, the Nuremberg trials put people to death for things that no one had even really offered as ever being illegal before that moment. They had to make up this. They're like, let's call it crimes against humanity. That sounds bad enough that it sounds like we can just pull it out of our ass right now so we can execute these people. And that's good. They didn't go far enough. They should have killed a lot more of them.
Yeah, the worst abuses of human rights over history have always been legal. I mean, what are you talking about?
That's the dumbest fucking
It's
thing I've
funny
ever heard.
because every paragraph in a Times editorial represents the dialectic. All right, we have one side, then we have the other side, the yin and the yang. All right, so we have Sawant absurdly called for resignation over crowd control tactics that are legal. Marching with supporters to the mayor's home, however, an address legally protected because of her law enforcement background, was a reckless breach of confidentiality that exposed the mayor and her family to potential harm. So, chemical attacks on protesters are good because they're legal. Marching to the mayor's house, I'm going to go and point out also legal, is bad because of, who knows? Because the mayor could have gotten hurt, I guess.
Yeah. Well, again, they're doing what Jenny did in her letter, which we read last week on the Patreon, and which you can see video of her reading if you go to our YouTube page. It tried to pin this on Kshama, like as if Kshama somehow got Jenny's address by hacking the city's computers. I guarantee you, Kshama had no fucking idea what Jenny Durkin's address was. It's not like she'd ever been invited over to a cocktail party, okay? In fact, I bet no one on the city council has. I bet literally I bet none of her staff have ever been there. But so they're trying to pin this shit on her that she had nothing to do with. She just spoke at a fucking rally. So we can just leave it at that. We already talked about this shit.
Yeah, but protesting a public official at their house in a wealthy neighborhood, bad. Firing gas grenades at people's heads, good.
Very good. Yes,
this is the
because the law.
Said it was okay at the time.
The law. And as we know, no one has any problem with what the law is in this city or this country. Everyone's all on the same page. The laws are good.
Well, and morality should always be judged by whether the act was legal at the time or not.
Elected officials can really only be held to that standard. Were they following the law? Yeah, well, I mean, sure.
All right, so here they're going to give a little bit of argument here. And I think that you should hear this out, Greg. So Durkin took the bait, requesting that the city council investigate whether several of the council members' recent political activities warrant punishment or expulsion. It was a reasonable move in theory, but given the city's political climate, it was doomed to fail. Sawant's response was predictable bombast. In a written statement, she called Durkin a, quote, corporate politician desperately looking to distract from her failures of leadership and politically bankrupt administration. She
Like, who reading this isn't like, oh, that sounds more reasonable than what you're saying?
Yeah.
Like,
she blamed the mayor for a torrent of violence by Seattle police. Small wonder that City Council President Lorena Gonzalez declined to pick up the issue as the mayor requested, instead urging the parties to set aside, quote, personal and political grievances and work together. First off, Gonzalez said that to the mayor, not to the mayor and Sawant.
Yeah.
And two, I love this idea that what they've set
as
up
we
here
predicted,
is Sawant bullied Gonzalez into this
That's so
response
fucking
is the
funny.
fucking thing.
Which they are just like Jenny did in that letter. They're just making Kshama sound fucking cool as shit and like even more politically powerful than she is. But hilariously, like the council, Gonzalez did exactly what we said last week she would do, which is just ignore this like a fart an old person made.
Yeah.
But like literally like the tersest like 3-line statement like what her response was basically what like
Yeah,
that was like just shut up, go away. Like is like we're just gonna pass legislation without you with veto proof majorities from now on, so this is the end for you basically. Like obviously it was never going to go anywhere. Like it was insane, as we said last week. Like for her to do this is like, like there was no possibility. Going to a legislative body and ask at any legislative body on any issue and asking for one of its members to be expelled because you, the executive, disagree with them. This has probably never worked in the history of parliaments in the world, okay? Like, if the council members have a problem, they will maybe deal with it, but they probably won't even then because you're asking someone to set a precedent for booting elected legislators out of office. It's like it almost never happens.
As dumb as many of our council members are, I think they can put it together. That's not in their best interest.
Also, this shit, as we detailed in the Patreon last week with Munya, every bullet point on that list was completely fabricated nonsense.
Yeah.
So it's like they're not going to do it. What it does ultimately then is just signal to the council, making Gonzalez say, what? No, go away. Is just that's it. That's the line. Like they're like, great, we don't have a mayor now.
Yeah.
We just pass veto-proof legislation or none at all, and that's what we do now. And fuck you. You have no power. You have nothing.
Yeah.
You are completely, utterly impotent. It would be better for the city if you just resigned.
Yeah, exactly. So in conclusion, the Times lets us know that vigorous debate is healthy for democracy and should be expected between two elected leaders with such different perspectives. But it is difficult to weigh the seriousness of Councilmember Sawant's concerns when she peddles such embroidered accusations.
Embroidered accusations? Oh, fuck. Oh, God. Oh,
So,
write the Seattle Times on a doily.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, that they got a little hard writing that in there. Like that, they high-fived each other.
Yeah.
Like the Blevin creeps were just like, yes, yes.
Oh, God.
They finished. Sawant should find ways to be constructive during these difficult times. I gotta say, she just got her tax passed.
Pretty
That seems
fucking constructive. So,
she adopted the position of, people in the streets of a 50% reduction of the Seattle PD's budget. And now that's becoming a thing that people have to talk about. That's pretty constructive.
Yeah. The head tax, which she led a movement to pass, 2+ years ago. It was then repealed. Has been in a war to get something like this passed forever. Her and Socialist Alternative and the Tax Amazon group have been collecting signatures for a ballot initiative which has always been a tactic to pressure the council into passing something. The fact that it wasn't Sawant and Mosqueda, right? That's right. It was Sawant and Mosqueda's bill, and it's a little different. And in the end, got some weird ass carve outs and a bizarre
20-year
sunset clause. That is not
the best Alex Peterson can get for Windermere.
That's not a thing.
Yeah.
Like a 20-year sunset clause, like a 5-year sunset clause,
Yeah.
100-year
Well,
sunset clause on like a treaty or
yeah.
something.
Reportedly,
a 20-year sunset
he
clause.
reportedly tried for 5. Everybody told him
Oh.
to fuck off. Then he went for 10. Everybody told him to fuck off again. And I guess 20 was so absurd. There was like,
So,
whatever. dude.
fine,
Whatever.
fine, sure, dude,
Look at the show.
whatever.
He then voted against it, which shows that you should never negotiate with
Yeah,
terrorists.
why even bother? But I mean, the purpose of that is for Peterson to be able to go to his real estate masters and go, look, I did something.
Yeah.
This is the best I could do.
Nobody can say that I didn't do something.
Which, I mean, yeah, way too much consolation for Alex Peterson, who should have walked away with absolutely nothing. It's embarrassing. It's another like cell phone passing a 20-year sunset clause is a cell phone because like it was 5. That would just mean like, well, they had the power to do that, to constrain it like that. 20-year sunset clause is like a legislative nothing. It's like it's insane. So that's just a cell phone. They should be embarrassed. Andrew Lewis should be eternally embarrassed for being associated, again, whatever the context, whatever legislation, a 20-year sunset clause should be an embarrassment to any legislator, whether you're for or against it. Okay, that's how like fucking waste of time it is. But look, they passed a progressive tax. This is what Kshama's been fighting for these fucking long ass years. Elected 3 fucking times. Like, yeah, someone should tell the Seattle Times, like, remind them that she was elected citywide once and twice again in District 3, despite this same article being published about 800 fucking times. Like, look, they got it passed. It's it's not a large amount of money.
Yeah.
It's like a few hundred million.
I've seen differing estimates of 200 to 500 million.
Yeah, and it's like
hard to say.
It's it's based on payrolls over like a large amount of money. So it's progressive in that way. It's good though. That money will hopefully go to good use, fucking like housing people and providing other whatever, filling whatever gaps are created by this hellish crisis we're in. But it's largely symbolic, It's like, look, we can do this.
And it establishes that these people can be taxed. And the thing is,
for all the work that's gone in for, this long fight, the last election, this was a huge issue in the last election in November. They were gathering the signatures to force their hand. The fact that people are in the streets now, even though that fight is largely about police violence, and the demands are about defunding SPD and spending that money on community. The city council was looking for good things to give to the people that were actually good. Okay.
Yeah.
That has an effect. The fact that people are in the streets now, in some of their more cynical minds or instinctively, they may be thinking, hopefully this will be a sop. Hopefully maybe this is. Because we got this passed, maybe this can dissipate, and I hope it does not end up that way. I hope it does not end up being a distraction or dissipating. I don't think it will because it's off topic. Ultimately, it's not really relevant, and it's largely symbolic because of how small a fucking amount of money it is. But that doesn't mean that the fact that people are in the streets, there's a massive fucking national uprising, including in this town, and recurring violence by police and right-wing nuts, that has an effect. That the city council knows people are watching them and they need to do something like a job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if there aren't people in the streets, this doesn't happen. Just plain and simple.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, yeah, this money, however meager it might be, it turns out we're actually going to need because we're heading towards an eviction apocalypse, Greg. And I'd just like to read. We'll put a link to it in the notes here. But there's a good article in the Washington Post about the reopening of eviction courts. Most states have had an eviction moratorium. And I'd just like to read you this little bit from the article here, Greg.
You went viral with this the other day, Brian, on the Twitter.
Greg, every day people wake up, me included, and say, "Should I post a good tweet today?" And most days we say no. But one day, I said yes. All right. So Judge Yvonne Williams, glasses snuggled tight to the blue mask covering most of her face, peered into the camera in her Texas courtroom recently to press a renter about the more than $4,000 she owed her landlord. "What do you have toward the rent?" Williams asked. The renter appeared on another shaky screen from a dark room and explained that she had been furloughed as the spread of novel coronavirus shut down much of the U.S. economy, but she had 3 kids and nowhere to go, and was working to raise the money, which included more than $1,000 in late fees. "I have heard almost 60 cases so far, and this is everybody's problem," Williams responded before approving the eviction.
Oh, well, I mean, listen, yeah. I've heard this one before. Get the fuck out of my face, and you're home.
Yeah, and the article goes on to point out that basically we are staring down the barrel of the largest increase in homelessness that the United States has probably ever seen. And just because...
Like a really rapid fire thing.
Yeah, that's going to happen in the space of months as opposed to, say, like years, like it took in the Great Depression. So Rich Smith, friend of the show, he had an article in the Slog actually talking about this as it affects Washington State. And let me just read this little bit that he has right here to give you some idea of the scale just for this area. Tenant advocates estimate that 50,000 Washington renters may face eviction once the statewide moratorium lifts. Ours lifts in August, by the way. Aaron Finner, who runs communications at Washington Community Action Network, admits the math is squishy, but calls the number conservative. 50,000 doesn't sound too far off. According to a Seattle Times review of the Household Pulse survey, 208,000 renters in the Seattle metro area alone, which includes King, Pierce, and Snohomish counties, say they cannot make July's rent. So, 50,000 statewide, we have 200,000 just in this area who say they aren't going to be able to make rent on August 1st. This is going to be, and to be clear, nobody's doing anything about this.
No.
There's not even an inkling of anything happening.
Look, some states, their eviction moratoriums are lifting, and the courts are opening up. I mean, what was it in Ohio? They had to open up their convention center to accommodate the regional eviction court, basically because they just need an auditorium to do it. To just this is the terror for evictions. This is they're having to develop new forms of eviction court, like the guillotine was developed to quickly and efficiently execute people.
Except unlike the guillotine, this shit isn't cool.
This is the gas chamber, of evictions. This is industrialized scale eviction is what is about to be happening.
Yeah, and they noticed that, or they know in Rich Smith's article that there was, in King County, there was a $5 million expansion of United Way's home base program, which they say helped 2,000 households keep a roof over their head for a couple of months, which is rent assistance, essentially. Around 7,000 people applied for the program within 48 hours after it launched, and applications have been paused because of the volume. So even that, which sounds like, $5 million in a rent assistance to help 2,000, people, that's not even close to what's required. They can't even accept the applications. There's so fucking many. And we're not even in the ballpark.
And these structures exist. They're having to be expanded right now. But everything in our society already exists. This isn't a weird thing. Our society, our systems, our governments will have to come up with evicting large amounts of people. All they have to do is expand the systems they already have. So in that Washington Post article, that judge is, one of the screenshots he posted is someone's saying, well, under the CARES Act, we've heard that maybe there might be an eviction moratorium on properties that have loans with Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And the judge is never heard of it. Fuck off.
Yeah. The judge literally evicts somebody who's supposed to be under moratorium.
And what the judge is basically saying is, cool, you should have shown up with a lawyer who could actually argue that. But because I'm wink, wink, just impartial here, and I'm not doing your research for you, I don't know shit about shit, and fuck you. Yep. So we have these systems already. We have sheriff's departments and courts that are just primed. They know how to do this. This is already their job. All they have to do is expand the volume. But they're ready and willing to do that. Okay, this piece of shit judge literally could have granted a stay of that, right, based on this, but because
held proceedings at least until they figured it out.
Yep, could have done anything, could have whatever, no interest, even though, of course they knew, but they, she was just denying it, saying, well, you should have brought a lawyer again, which no one can fucking afford, obviously.
Well, again, the bringing a lawyer, knowing the law in and out, all that kind of stuff, that for some reason, the burden of it is entirely on the renter, who is, by the way, the only person with the job in this scenario between the landlord and the judge.
Yeah.
The only person who actually has to like do stuff in their fucking life. And the only person who like isn't attached to the law in some way, right? You know, like isn't a fucking judge who's supposed to know this shit, and isn't a fucking landlord who's supposed to know the laws.
Just think about that. Just think about the
renter
judge.
is the one who's it's entirely on the renter.
and it's not just that. Just think about the judge who's like, yeah, I know all about this shit because it's literally what I do all day, but I'm going to sit here and I think of it as my job to fuck you. Yeah. Which means I'm going to use anything I can to fuck you, even though the Congress literally passed a law. This is the impotence of the CARE Act, right? Yeah. Is like there's nothing to it because this judge is able to sit there and go, I never heard of it. Fuck you. Because that's what they think of as their job. Yeah. Okay, this is why, like, it's just like the cops. Like, everything about our society, everything about our so-called government is designed. Everyone knows their job is to fuck you.
Yeah. As the judge says in that article, their job is to enforce contracts, and leases are contracts. Now, the judge, as that article points out too, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac did create a website where you can name search, a property to see if it's covered, under this moratorium, which means the judge literally could have just turned in their chair and essentially Google searched.
Well, that would be if their job was to either enforce the law equally, like equality under the law, or even imagine this, to help people who need of help, like who are coming before them for that reason.
Yeah. Well, and the big thing too is
no, because that's what you think. If you're even showing up to a court rather than just leaving, it's because you think I'm going to go to court because the court is this is an arbiter of justice who I can go before and plead before the court my just case and get it, because that person who was told to fuck off by the judge could have just left their house and gone and lived in a ditch. No, they're like, no, I'm going to go to the court. Yeah, but this is what that person didn't realize is that they
boarded themselves up in the house and told their landlord to fuck off. Right? They could have done
murdered their landlord. I'm going to put an echo on that in the, and. No, they went before a judge, and the judge is like, no, you don't get it. Oh, that's so sweet. You came here thinking I was like some kind of arbiter of neutral justice. No, my job is to kill you.
You thought if you played the game, you would somehow come out on top, not understand. You clearly don't understand what the game is. And, in Seattle, where there is extended protections for renters that don't exist in, say, Austin, Texas, where that judge was, in Rich Smith's article, he points out that there's still a million loopholes that all the landlords are currently taking advantage of. He quotes one person who is in the process of being evicted, who says, quote, "My landlord told me that they will not let me renew my lease unless I pay everything that I owe, including all of the late fees, even though the state moratorium banned landlords from collecting late fees during this time." So this person's lease is up in August, because everybody's lease is up some point in the year, and the landlords are essentially just holding all the late fees and the accrued rent as a hostage, right? And of course he's not gonna be able to pay it. If you couldn't pay it that month, you don't have 4 months of rent on you.
Yeah, fuck, man.
And by the way, these late fees amount to the thousands of dollars for most people.
Absurd.
They're absurd. The late fees are higher than a loan shark's late
fees.
The
landlords, there's lots of loopholes, but there's also lots of tricks. I mean, like this is like the same stuff they're always
boarding up your house and refusing to leave.
But I mean, on the landlord's part, like the lease thing, this is what gets a lot of people. But the thing is, like, your landlord is almost always lying to you. They'll always come to you from a position of like legal authority, like, look, this is what this paper, I have this authority, this is my place. They're almost 100% of the time lying to you. For example, your lease being up doesn't mean shit except that they can raise your rent. That's all it means, and that even is constrained somewhat in the law. You don't actually have the term on your lease doesn't mean anything except that's how your rent is the same. That's literally the only thing a term on a lease means. When the term on your lease is up, you still have a lease. It's the same as it was when you signed it. It goes forever as long as you keep paying. Now, they could raise your rent. That's the thing they can do.
Yeah.
But they'll always come to you and lie about every fucking detail.
Of course.
Fuck, man. I.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, the reason why they can lie to you is because there's an inherent power imbalance between you, right? You, as the renter, have nothing but your, I guess, wits and guile to protect you, whereas the landlord has the entire armed apparatus of the state on their side.
Yeah.
And, that's an inherently unequal situation. Now, that being said, if your landlord tries to evict you, if you're one of these people who's about to get evicted because you can't pay your rent, do not leave your fucking house, all right? Do not leave your fucking apartment. Do not fucking leave, all right? Fuck them, all right? That's the actual answer to this.
Yeah.
Is fuck them. The reason why we didn't have a greater homeless crisis during the Depression was that literally, particularly in cities, including the city of Seattle, there were tenants committees that just said, no, we're not doing evictions anymore. That's done.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
sorry.
that is the
better
hope.
luck next decade.
That's the hope.
You
get a eviction notice on your door. You either just throw it in the trash, or you take it and you organize and you get people to help you and tell your landlord to fuck off. I mean, that sounds really hard right now, but I mean, if it starts coming
when you're
down,
one of 20 people, 30 people, 40 people in your building that are being evicted, go find all those people. Don't hide like it's shameful. Go find those people, get together, and say fuck you to your landlord that you're not moving.
Yeah. And you may have to organize someone may have to be at the front door at all times, keeping away the locksmiths and the whoever else, but that's what it's going to come to. That's what it's going to come to all across America is people are going to have to band together and just throw things at their landlords if they try to come by and fuck with them.
Well, once again, the courts are not going to fucking help you. The courts aren't going to help you. The police are going to come in to bash your fucking heads in. All that shit's going to happen. Your only power is in the streets. So fuck them. Tell them to go fuck themselves. Get in the streets. Talk to the people in your building. Talk to the people on your street. Tell them to go fuck themselves. All right? Arab Venner from the Washington Community Action Network, they have this great quote in here, sort of closing out of Rich Smith's article, talking about the various bullshit solutions that have been suggested in King County exclusively. Nobody else is offering anything even. This is how it always goes. The burden is always on the renters. They have to find the rental assistance, and they have to get it in time to not get evicted. I'd be very excited about rental assistance if we also made sure that tenants could stay in their homes. Now, what they're getting at is this sort of problem in the legal proceedings which comes with renting, which is any legislator that is, passing legislation on renters' rights and things like that isn't a fucking renter, right?
Yep.
They're much more likely to be a landlord than a fucking renter. Any judge that's going to be adjudicating these cases is definitely not a fucking renter and is much more likely to be a landlord.
And they all are landlords too.
Yeah.
This wasn't always the case. If you go back to, again, the Great Depression, not every rich person was a fucking landlord.
Yeah.
Now
they all are.
Every rich person is a landlord because that's what we've done to real estate speculation and investment has been the vehicle of bourgeois wealth growth. They all have at least any comfortable rich person has at least one rental property and probably more.
Yeah. So don't expect any help from the
My last
state.
landlord was a cop.
Yeah.
Think about that for a minute.
There you
My
go.
landlord, before I lived on the sea, my landlord was a cop.
Greg's current landlord is Poseidon.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, the thing is, these are linked things. The movement against police violence and against policing generally. We keep telling you it's only going to be won in the streets. The same thing with this current eviction crisis that's about to hit us like a ton of fucking bricks. And honestly, we should all be in the streets together because there's a lot of overlap between people who are getting fucked over by the cops and people who are being fucked over by their landlords in the streets together, guys.
Yep.
Yeah. Right on. Well, I think...
boy, gosh, it's getting late.
Greg's taking his pills, his zinc, or whatever the fuck he keeps taking.
Gosh, getting too late to talk about Carmen Best and Katie Herzog.
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to have time to talk about Carmen Best and her Mary Kay Letourneau fiasco, or Katie Herzog's letter to Harper's Bazaar magazine.
It's not Harper's okay,
I'm going to keep saying it because it's fun to say. But yeah, I guess we're just going to have to cover it in the Patreon episode. And by the way, we have a couple of new patrons.
Yes. Carolyn and Allie will get to hear us talk about those things. I bet they're very excited about that. Welcome to the fold, new suckers.
Yeah. So if you want to hear about all that stuff, become a patron. It's for the price of, I don't know, a latte, or what were we supposed to say?
It's the market price of a Starbucks latte. Your
Look,
neighborhood Starbucks.
It's $5, and it keeps Greg loaded on zinc. And
I also take melatonin to sleep. I take magnesium as magnesium citrate, not the more common magnesium oxide. I take a multivitamin. What else? Gosh, this isn't as exciting as it would be.
Greg, like a normal person, I just watch 2 hours of ASMR videos, and then I close my little eyelids and go to sleep.
Cool.
All right. So, anyways, become a Patreon. Become a patron. I don't know why I always say Patreon. Go to Patreon. Become a patron.
It's a made-up word they made up.
I know. I fucking hate it. Whatever. Anyways, we will be talking. I promise we actually will talk about the Mary Kate Letourneau thing. It is funny, and we will talk about Katie.
Her death?
I honestly, yeah, a little bit. but yeah, why were all the teachers molesting children in Washington State in the 90s? That's a real good question we need to get to at some point. But yeah, we'll get to all that in the Patreon. So join us, and for all the rest of you fucking freeloaders out there, we'll see you next week. So bye.